Do you have to deal with meetings you can't stand? Are you running the meetings you can't stand? My next guest is a physician turned corporate consultant with clients like NASA Astronaut Corps, Lockheed Martin, and the FBI. He shares my philosophy of bright, meaningful entertainment and has used his wit and insight to help companies meet less and do more. Today, he's going to help us break up with bad meetings for good. You might recognize him from the episode How to Deal with People You Can't Stand, named after his book, where he gave strategies on how to bring out the best in people who drive you to drink. Best-selling author, societal scholar, introverted entertainer, Dr. Rick Brinkman. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's always a pleasure to be here with you, Meredith. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I think hating meetings is like the ultimate unifier of people.
Absolutely.
Like we don't even need to talk about why they suck. We all know that bad meetings suck, but what we don't know is why do managers who also used to hate meetings when they were underlings now always want to have them? Any insight?
Well, I think that people are paranoid in a way of being left out or leaving people out for some reason. And so they want to get everybody maybe on board or make sure everybody is bored is what happens.
Right.
And
on board and bored.
The more people you have at a meeting, the more opportunity for distraction and unfocused. And especially if people don't feel like they need to be there. A lot of times I have a friend who's in upper management in banking, and he gets invited to every meeting. And if he went to every meeting he's invited to, he'd be working 2 weeks in 1 week. It's just simply impossible. But, people are inviting him because, well, we don't want to leave him out, or maybe we should do that. And so, that's part of a good agenda. Who needs to be there? Who should be there? And you really only want the people you need. There's the people who really need to be there to discuss things. And then there's a group of people that need to know. So they need to know what happened at the meeting. They need maybe a summary of the decisions that are made or the discussions. Like my friend in management, he might need to know, but he doesn't have to be there in presence. So that's a really important for whoever's creating the agenda. What are we really trying to accomplish and who needs to be there?
Is there a nice way to ask that as a person who gets invited to the meeting without just saying, hey, do I really need to go to this?
Well, I think you really have to ask, do I really need to go to this? And then you say, I don't think that I'm because there's people who are there's the doers and the discussers, but then there's those need to know people. And if you're a need to know, you go, no, thank you. Just inform me. Send me a summary of whatever notes were taken or whatever you feel is appropriate for your level. But you really have to draw a line. Otherwise, it's insanity.
It takes over your life.
The more people at a meeting, the more distraction, the more off course it's going to be. Some people are checking their phones because they don't need to be there. It totally dilutes it. And you know what? I think we brought it up at first. People hate meetings universally. So if you say to somebody, how'd you like to not have to attend this meeting, but we'll send you a summary? Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for making my day.
Exactly. Like, forget the Christmas ham. All I want is to not have to go to this thing. Yeah.
Right.
Has there been an impact on the quality or quantity of meetings since the pandemic and since the Great Resignation?
Well, the big change was us going into virtual meetings more and more. And, that was, my book was written before the pandemic, and virtual meetings were something that I've been a part of for more than a decade on some of the boards that I've been on. And of course, we're scattered all over the country and such. So virtual meeting was very efficient instead of having everybody fly in. And I feel like, in a way, virtual meetings are even easier to structure than in-person meeting.
How so?
Well, first of all, there's three things that really need to be. I think it's really useful to think of a meeting like a long jet flight. You got a bunch of people in a contained space. They don't really want to be there, right? But they're stuck there. The plane can leave late. The meeting starts late. The plane can go off course, or it can be hijacked, just like the meeting. If you arrive late at your destination, then you miss your connections on the other meetings. And so really, imagine if you got on a plane and the pilot said, well, we don't have any air traffic control, so we're going to leave here at some point and we're going to head across the country, and at some point, I'm not sure when, but we'll probably get you to your destination, probably, eventually. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah.
And so, there's a flight plan, and they know exactly where you are, right? We're leaving at 10:43. At 11:52, we're going to be right over here. It's laid out like that, and an agenda should be laid out like that, too. I definitely think you should use strange times. None of this on the top of the hour or on a 5 or a 15 or a 30. No, the meeting's going to start at 11:02. You need to log in by 10:57. You want to give people a login time, because otherwise everybody's kind of coming in at the last moment. Oh. And if you think of this like instead of a virtual meeting, if it was like a physical meeting, everybody's trying to rush into the door at the same last moment, and they all get stuck like in a comedy routine. And people are not going to find the login. Suddenly they're looking at it. They get distracted by an email that they see while they're looking for the login. So you got to give them a time. All right, 10:57, you log in. The meeting starts at 11:02. We're going to discuss this for 17 minutes, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to end by 11:41 on the dot. And then once you start having that level of structure, and there's something else in the agenda, in our flight plan here, and that is, most agendas have a title, and this is what we're going to talk about or whatever, and maybe even if they're really good, what we're going to do. There's going to be a presentation for 10 minutes by Yin, then we have a 25-minute discussion, then we have to decide this, which is really good if that is on the agenda. But I think what's really important is to have a statement of purpose and a statement of focus. Why is this item so important that we are spending our valuable time being in this room or virtual or real together? What's the point? Let's say the office is being moved, physically rearranged, okay? Purpose, to minimize the impact of the office move on you and your team. Oh, well, okay, that's a good idea. All right, so now I know why this is important. All right, that's the statement of purpose. And then statement of focus. What do you want from me? We want you to come knowing your team's workflow and having thought about, is there a certain time of day and or day of the week that would be least disruptive to move your office and your team? So now I'm coming in oriented. I know what we're trying to accomplish, and I know what is needed from me, and that is the first step to staying on course in our what I call the meeting jet flight plan.
That is way above what is normally considered the meeting agenda, which is like the manager sends out an email that says quarterly meeting. And that's right. That's the agenda. Question on the starting time. How do you feel about starting even if people aren't there? Like,
absolutely.
Really?
You definitely should start. You got to teach. It's like, I love Lucy. I'm going to teach Lucy a lesson. We are starting on time, no matter who is not there. And in fact, in doing research of the book, I had many organizations tell me that when the meeting starts, the door is locked.
Really?
And nobody gets in. At one place, they told me an executive vice president was stuck outside, and they left him outside for the whole half-hour meeting because that's the rule. You also want to have no distractions. At one engineering firm, there was a basket by the door. When you came into the meeting, you put your cell phone in the basket. We are focused, because the more focused you can be, the not only the better result you're going to get, but the quicker you're going to get through the whole damn thing, right? It's just going to be good, and that's what we want, and that's what everybody wants. And once I have found that when I've put in place what I have been calling the meeting magic, people grab this like a life preserver, because all of a sudden the meeting isn't just torture. You know what it's about. You know what the purpose is. The right people are there, so you can actually make decisions properly. And the group starts going through items like a wood chipper. And so I would say every agenda item, when we print an agenda, should have, all right, what's the topic? All right, what's the process? Like I mentioned, Yin's going to do a presentation, then we have a discussion. This is the time frame, and then a statement of purpose and a statement of focus. And that's where you start to stay on course right there at the beginning of the meeting.
So, how do you know when a meeting just should have been an email? Because when I polled my Facebook audience, they said that was the number one complaint that they had. How do you know when information warrants a meeting and when it should just be an email?
Well, if you need interaction, interaction is the magic word. That's when you need a meeting for people to interact with each other. If you just want yes or no, what's your opinion on this? Then you can put out an email if it's really simple. But meetings should be for interaction, and that brings up another thing. Too many meetings are about information dissemination. Like, here's this, we're going to discuss this. Here's the policy. No, no, that's what electronic paper is for, so to
Right.
speak. It's all that information should be given to people ahead of time. Now, I may need that information so I can have a good interaction with everybody, in which case, great, I should have it ahead of time. I read it ahead of time. Now we come into that meeting and we're ready to do the part the meeting is for, where we interact about that information.
The other big complaint that I heard was lack of accountability. Decisions were made, assignments were given, but by the time the next meeting rolled around, those who made the decisions and received the assignments didn't do what they said that they were going to do. How does your process and in your consulting work, how do you increase accountability for follow through?
Because when a meeting gets this structured and everybody sees how much you can get done in a short amount of time, it's also clearer in the first place what their assignment needs to be and what they need to give you ahead of time. Whoever's creating the agenda, there should be a time frame for whether it's a few days or a week. It depends how complex your agenda is, but where people are going to give you the information or the result of whatever their assignment was, so that could be integrated into the agenda ahead of time.
So basically, that's like public shaming. Like, and now we're going to go to Bob because last meeting he said he was going to do XYZ. Bob, take it away. And he's like,
Uh,
it only
yeah, but
takes
he
one
wouldn't
of
be
those.
surprised at the meeting because he would have already received the agenda, seen that he, 3 days earlier that he's got to do the presentation. So maybe now he'll really get it done
Oh,
in
I
time for this
like
meeting.
that. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And you also talk about having a speaking cue in meetings. So everyone knows, for example, we're going to contribute to this idea counterclockwise around the table. How does that work on Zoom calls?
Well, that's really part of air traffic control, because what's typical in any meeting, virtual or uh, live in person, is that some people talk too much and other people don't talk at all. Right? Your introverts are going to lay back, and your more extroverts are like all over the meeting, and so you really need to have a speaking cue. Now, you can have a voluntary cue where people, maybe they raise a hand. So in a Zoom meeting, we have a hand raise function, and that puts the image right at the top. So that's a simple way to do it. In other meetings, I've used the chat. You just type your name in the chat, and now you're on the queue, and that's all we use the chat for. We do not chat with each other behind what's going on at the meeting. We're all needing to be focused at the meeting, because the chat would be the equivalent of, in a physical meeting, leaning over and talking to the person next to you. If it needs to be said, it needs to be said to the group. So you can have a voluntary speaking order, or as you pointed out, a circular order. We're going to go around an order. I remember when I was teaching this in the UK at one point, we broke people into small groups to run a meeting. And one of the feedback that's really stuck with me is, a woman stood up and she said, you know what, I'm more extroverted. I always talk first, but because we had this cue, I couldn't talk first, and I had to listen to my coworkers. And I realized, wow, these people are really smart and they think like I do.
Oh my
And she goes, I
God.
never realized that because I always speak first.
I have so many thoughts on that. 'Cause-
And
yeah.
where I saw this the first time, it was a board meeting where it's in person, and people kind of would raise their hand to speak, and the president wrote down their name. All right, we have Mary, and then we'll have Tom, and then Jan, and he would say their names, and then when somebody finished, he would go, okay, now we have 10. He would repeat this again, and what I experienced in the room was this feeling of, and everybody kind of relaxed and let go. Because, it's like, not, I got to jump in there and say what I have to say. And if I'm waiting to jump in there, I'm not really listening to the person. I'm listening for breathing changes. Right. And when they start to breathe, I'm going to dive into that space. So this relaxation came over the room, and I thought, what would be better? Let's put it up on a whiteboard. So, I got up at the next meeting and I started putting people's names on the whiteboard, and it was so great. People, when you have a cue, you're going to hear from everybody, and there's one other step here that really is important. And that's that we do what's called flight recording. That whatever people say, you make it visual. So, staying in the physical space on a whiteboard, somebody says blah, 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 and we write it on the whiteboard. Somebody says, I think da, 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 and we write it on the whiteboard. If we're in the Zoom space, easy enough. There should be a shared slide. I think this is perfect for a PowerPoint slide. What you do is in the title area of the PowerPoint slide, write the statement of purpose and focus that was on the agenda. What's the point of this, and what do you want from me? And then take notes, summarize what people say in bullets. I mean, you ever somebody repeat themselves in a meeting?
Oh,
you ever
yeah.
somebody repeat themselves in a meeting? You ever somebody, when people repeat themselves, it is an idiot light on your dashboard going, I'm not you, got it. I'm not you, got it. So I got to say it a bunch of times. But if I say, I think we should have a committee to explore the art issue with the journal. Okay, committee to explore the art issue on the journal. I see it. I see you see it. 5 minutes later, it's still in the room with us. It immediately decreases the amount of repetition. You're not going to have the same person repeat it again. If there is no visual recording, and I have a concept I feel is important to the group mind, I'm going to say it a bunch of times as a way of keeping an awareness. Other people are going to then do the same thing who agree with me. But if we all see it, it's done, and you don't get that repetition, so you save a ton of time. And instead of people repeating, what they do is they add to it, and then you start to get what I call is holographic thinking. That's, you have two eyes that see from two different points of view, right eye and your left eye. Imagine them arguing whose point of view is correct. Well, that's absurd. They're both correct and they're both different. And when your brain synthesizes two points of view, you now see three dimensions. So I find in a meeting, if we hear from everybody, that's where we get the hologram. And the problem is, if there's unstructured, you're only going to hear more from your assertive people. So you're only getting part of the picture. You're not going to get the third dimension because your passive people are dropping out and your assertive people are dominating. But if you go around the room and then you make what people say visual, then you get some really quality discussion. And then those visual notes, which are very simple but complete, are a terrific thing that you then send to everybody, and you send to those need-to-know people who just need to know what happened after the meeting.
I feel like you just took me on a journey of like super stress as you were explaining the repetition that happens. I was like feeling like, oh my God, I'm in the meeting. And now I feel so much calmer from what you just described. So, wow. And it was all in my head. So I can't imagine folks that have to deal with this on a weekly basis. Now, in your book, at the end of each chapter, you talk about like, I forget what you call them, but like meeting success stories, basically. Great moments. And I love those. Those are so great. But inquiring minds want to know, what's the worst meeting that you've ever witnessed? Or maybe it's one you heard about.
Yeah, it's be something when there's too many people there, and if it's too many, you're already dead in the water. Well, here's something. It was over 10 years ago. There was a bill was put forth in New York State for licensing of naturopathic physicians, which are holistic physicians, which is my background. And along the way, the bill got stripped to the point where half the doctors in the state said, forget it, this is a terrible bill. We have more flexibility if we don't even have a bill. Where the other half was like, well, you get your foot in the door and then you expand your scope. So the bill failed. So now you had a profession divided, where each half thought the other half was crazy for thinking what they think. So the board wisely said, we've got to get everybody in a room in Manhattan, get them all together. Let's try if we can get 50 people and really discuss what lines we do not cross. So far, so good. Then along the way, they asked me to facilitate. And then I went up to India and I was kind of out of touch for a while. And when I got back, I found they decided this would be a virtual meeting. Now, this is before pandemic. So virtual meetings were still like, what's that? All right. And I'm immediately thinking, no, this is not going to work, because if you and I think we're on opposite sides of an issue, okay, and you're crazy to think, and you think I'm crazy to think what I think, we got to be in the same room together. We got to express ourselves, know the other person's hearing it, that the eagle is landing, if we're going to find the resolution. But in a virtual meeting like that, and especially, first of all, you couldn't even have 50 webcams on, so
Right.
technically it was impossible. So there's no accountability. For all you know, people are out walking the dog, and then they show up again. So I need to tell the president, I don't think this is going to work. But if this is what we have to do, I'll try to figure out a way. So what happened there was I put out, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to use GoToMeeting, pre-Zoom even, and you're going to need to be there, and here's how you're going to speak. I'm going to call on you and unmute you. If it takes you more than 3 seconds to start speaking, I'm going to assume that you are not paying attention, and then I will kick you out of this meeting. And I'm going to call people at random. And then I was taking notes. I had the PowerPoint slide, and people started, and people loved it. They were so engaged because without that flight recording, you just go into an empty space, and where did the thought I just put out go? But as people started seeing the thoughts, and people built on other thoughts, and oh, this is a good idea here, they realized they were creating a puzzle picture, but each one only had a few pieces. And we went a little over an hour and a half without even taking a break, and everybody was focused. I didn't have to kick anybody out of the room. We took a 15-minute break, and then we did another 2 hours.
Wow.
And people raved about that meeting and just how effective it is. Because if it's really effective, then you're not feeling like you're wasting your lifetime, right? in this meeting. So I'm telling you, if you have that focus and purpose, you put that in the title, you take notes so people see what's being said, and you have some sort of speaking order, whether it's voluntary or circular. It's a major transformation.
I mean, those are great tips. I could completely see how, especially in a Zoom meeting, having the PowerPoint would really make up for the lack of like head nodding and eye contact that you might not be getting because you're virtual and you're in those little Brady Bunch squares on Zoom.
Yeah.
And these tips are so good, and I think they would be perfect for someone rolling out a brand new fresh batch of meetings. But how does someone in a leadership position who is really crappy at meetings start to turn things around when everyone is used to crappy meetings, and so because of that they show up late, they're not present, they're not prepared, etc.? Like, how do you get that huge meeting turnaround so people rave about a meeting like the one you just talked about?
Right. So even if you're not in charge, even if you're a participant, how do you get that change? Well, if I wasn't in charge, I'd go to the person who is in charge and say, hey, how'd you like to hear an idea that makes our meetings more focused, effective, and shorter? It's a rare human being says, no, we don't want that. What are we going to do for wasted time and misery? Come on.
As long as we have donuts, it's fine. Just bring the donuts.
So that you present it, how'd you like to have a meeting be shorter? How'd you like to have it be more effective? And then you say, well, let's try an experiment. All right. I read this book, or I heard this guy, right?
But don't tell him the name of the book, right? Won't that, like, he'll be mad? Like, so I read this book called How to Deal with Meetings You Can't Stand. Wouldn't that be like kind of bad?
But that's how people feel. It really resonates.
That's true.
Everybody goes, oh yeah, I got those. I've never met anybody who said, oh no, I love our meetings. They're always great.
That's true. Okay.
Yeah. So that's what you have to present. And then you say it's an experiment. Let's try it twice and see what happens. And what I found is people grab it like a life preserver and they never let go. The meeting suddenly becomes so much more focused, so much more effective. You know what got done. You have that summary in the PowerPoint slide. People never let go of it.
I love that. Okay. Politicians, what changes should Congress be making to their meetings?
Well, the first thing would be that it's the United States of America, not the selfish states of America, and that if it's your right eye or your left eye, but you only have half, you're not getting the synthesis, and it's the synthesis that we're looking for, that third dimension. And unless you hear from everybody and you integrate it, you get polarization, which is what happens in Congress, and especially if there's only two parties. I mean, they just can go into a pattern of opposition with each other, just because even though the party in power before was suggesting the same thing, now they're opposed to it because they don't want the party that's now in power to get credit for that thing. And so it's not about finding the highest option. And that's a shame, because that's what this country was founded on, is how do you integrate, the South with its agriculture, the North, which was getting more industrial, different needs, different economies, but finding that sweet spot where it integrates and becomes something greater. So I always thought we should have a thing on the screen, if you watch a congressional thing, that shows you how much money is being spent at that moment, having all those people in the room that you're paying for with your taxes to just kind of jerk each other around and be oppositional, make speeches that really have nothing to do with what's going on now. You see, that's no focus. You got to speak to the topic or you don't get to speak. We're like trying to find integration. It's a recipe for disaster and wasted time. And
I think
money.
that's a really nice way of saying shit show, but I appreciate your
I was avoiding it, but thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your diplomacy, but yeah, shit show. Okay, so the question becomes, how do we get you to facilitate the debates, the presidential debates? Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, that would be fun. It would be more, debates are one thing, but if I think, once they get into Congress, they need to check their political affiliation at the door.
Yeah.
And now you're part of this United States to find the integration. What's the integration? They're not even looking to find the integration. It's just looking to find ways to polarize and make the other side wrong.
Well, it's interesting. If we make meetings more productive on the corporate level, right? And people who own businesses and own corporations eventually cycle into politics. I don't know. Maybe there is hope.
Yeah, perhaps if they could change the process. I mean, we all think the process is chiseled in stone, but the process has been made up as we went along.
Exactly. And it's
300
not that
years
old.
from now, past, there was no process 300 years ago. So I mean, it's just, we need to create it as, if everybody, well, I don't
know. So what's next for you? Are you doing seminars? Are you doing another book?
Well, I'm doing a lot of virtual seminars, which I was, in the virtual space anyway. I already had a video studio set up way before pandemic. So I've actually enjoyed the pandemic. I know it's a terrible thing, but if by the third month of the pandemic, I was already home longer than in a row than I had been since 1986. So that kind of was cool. And I also kind of like the virtual space. I think it's a very efficient way to meet. And, you see everybody there, and it's very easy to go around the room in that virtual space. I feel like, and you don't have to fly somewhere and what it costs. I'm on a volunteer board for an organization, and, it was like $15,000 at least to get everybody in a room together, at least, if not more. And here it's like zero. It's an hour of everybody's time, really. And then plus, I think it's really like Star Trek to see everybody on view screens. I'm a big Star Trek fan, so I like that part of it too.
So as we wrap up, tell everyone where they can buy your fabulous book and keep in touch with you.
Oh, well, it's McGraw-Hill, so it's wherever fine books are sold. Amazon, of course. And it's really a next step to the dealing with people you can't stand, because that was about people and behaviors, and like know-it-alls who are going to dominate meetings, go on and on and on, tanks who just run over people at meetings, all the passive behaviors where you don't hear from them, but then you hear behind the back after the meeting. But so this was I found that this meeting structure eliminates all 10 of the difficult behaviors. You don't get tanks, you don't get know-it-alls, you don't get think they know-it-alls who dominate the airspace. You don't get the people who are not saying what they really feel. You just really, it just neutralizes all of the 10 difficult behaviors. and you get more done with less effort and less time at a higher quality.
It's really the most practical book I've read in a really long time as far as like psychology and people behavior. You know, a lot of those books are, in my opinion, they're a little like, I don't know, narcissistic. Like, what type are you? What color or animal or ENFJW black XYZ are you? And it's like, okay, that's a good start, I guess. But really, the point is to be able to interact and understand with, you know, other humans and stuff. And so I
Yes.
really enjoyed your first book, and I'm so glad that you have this other version. You know, I feel like they're partners in crime, those two books. So
They certainly are.
yeah.
Yep. Yep. You know, it started with my former partner, Rick Kirshner, whom was my co-author on Dealing People He Can't Stand. The meeting thing was my own thing after that. But we found that we would always end up being on opposite sides of an issue, and then we would argue for 30 minutes, and at the same moment, we would convince each other, and then we'd argue another 30 minutes from the other side. No, you were right. No, you were right. I think you were. But where we'd end up when we saw the integration of the points, oh, it's not either or, it's about an integration of these points. We started beginning our meetings with, will the greater Rick come in the room? Right, we're both Rick. Will the greater Rick come in? And that was a reminder that it's like right eye, left eye. It's not one's right, one's wrong. It's about the integration. And I taught this to a group, ETBS, Employment Training and Business Services, and they embraced it. They starting their meetings by saying, will the greater ET come in this room? And just saying that, everybody realized, okay, I have a piece of the puzzle, and therefore, even though I'm a little passive, I need to share it. And even though I'm a little more assertive, I need to allow space for other people to share it. Otherwise, we don't get the hologram. So it's a simple thing, and it just works.
Exactly. Well, thank you again. Thank you for this episode. Thank you for your book. And I hope that people go and find it, read it, leave it on your boss's desk.
Yeah, baby. There's a chapter on how to talk to your boss about.
Oh, excellent. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you again. This has been fantastic.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's my most favorite podcast show to be on.
Oh, well, you flatter me. Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. I hope to see you next week too. I talk with the most interesting people that you've probably never heard of. Most of them are paradoxical and bring an opportunity for you to grow as a person. So if you like bright, meaningful entertainment, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications.